Yeah, hello. It's a privilege to bring this opportunity to you and to share a little bit of some of the things I've been doing in terms of scholarship and research in international human resources. I've had experience working in HR organizations and HR departments of countries like around the world. And it's been a tremendous privilege to learn and experiences the difference that happens in the workplace as a result of international HR. For many people, they are aware of local HR, and that's the HR that happens in that local organization. By local, meaning in one country. But you notice that one of the things that happens to organization is as they grow, and as they grow across national boundaries. And when they do that, then they go international. We can observe four levels of growth for most organizations. For most organizations, they start local. It's just one organization in one country. That's what we mean by local. So it's a company in India, or a company in Canada, or a company in Nigeria, or a company in the US. It's just in one country. Now it could have many branches in in that same country, but it's just one country. So we define it as local. And then the company starts to grow and goes and realize that there is opportunity elsewhere. And then the company decides to respond to that opportunity by selling its product to another country, but still producing from that one country. So you consider maybe like a country producing from that started as local in the US and then realize that there's a demand for its product in Canada and then start to sell these products to Canada. So it's producing in one country but selling elsewhere. That company has gone international. It's just gone international because it's still producing from one place but selling in a second market or a third market, as the case may be. Now, it's also possible for that company to further grow and realize that no, I can't keep producing at this place because now maybe I produce in the US. Now I have a market in Europe and I can't keep shipping. I need to have a presence in Europe and start to produce in Europe. Then that company now becomes a multinational. So that means that company is producing in more than one country, is distributing in more than one country, and is also marketing and doing management in more than one country. And then you get to the fourth stage, which is the global company or the global organization, where the company produces everywhere and sells everywhere and markets everywhere. So local companies, do I need to give you an example? Is there any company you know that is in one country? It's a local company. I mean, a local organization, as the case may be. Could be a local university, a local college, a bakery, a gas station, or a petrol station, as they call in some countries. International, maybe somebody who makes shoes in Nigeria and sells to Ghana, or somebody who plants yam in Nigeria and sells to somebody in Ghana, or somebody who produces in the US and sells to Canada. That is an international organization. Then the third level of growth, another example to give you is moving from international to becoming multinational, is a company that produces in few countries and then moves elsewhere and start to produce too. Maybe a girl I want to give is Tesla. As big as Tesla is, Tesla has always produced in North America, in fact, US to be more precise. But recently they decided to produce in Germany because they opened a huge factory in Germany and they now produce for the European market in Germany, as the case may be. And then when you talk about global organization, the last stage of growth is a company that is everywhere, producing everywhere. You start to think about Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola produces in every country using various arrangements. So in Nigeria, for example, the Coca-Cola company bottles through the Nigerian bottling company. In Ghana, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, that happens. Now, that company that has gone through this level of growth has done it because of certain things. There are a number of things that drive that growth. One of it is that maybe the company is going to another country because there's a bigger market. So, for example, in the case of Tesla, they started to see a lot of demand in Europe, right? And they started to realize that people were buying their cars there. It could be because of market. Second reason could also be because of factor endowment. So maybe they realize that they have a natural resource where that they need to go to. So, for example, you see oil companies in Africa go to Africa. So you see Shell in Nigeria, you see Chevron in Nigeria, you see Mobil in Nigeria because there is oil. But you may not see them in Gambia. You may not see them in Senegal. You may not see them in Portugal, maybe because there is no factor of production leading in there. So and then there could be other factors, but the three dominance factors that could lead this expansion across national boundaries would be one, market, the sales of the goods or services. Second reason could also be access to factors of production. I've given the example of oil, but it's also the factor of production could also be people. So maybe skilled people or the number of people. So that's why, for example, organizations go to manufacture, for example, in China. If you want to do electric vehicle batteries, for example, you may be going to China because that's where you have a lot of skilled, not skilled people that can make it happen. If you produce cashew in Nigeria, you may have to be moving it to Vietnam because you may be able to get more people that can be more skills to help you process it at the end of the day. And that's the second reason, the factors of production, whether it's going to be skill, whether it's going to be natural resources. And finally, there could be a third reason. It could be just a question of geographic advantage. So this company may realize that I need to go to Singapore because Singapore is a shipping hub. Chevron has a refinery in Singapore, for example, but Chevron does not produce oil in Singapore. But Singapore is a shipping hub, so it picks you to um, produce your products there as a refinery product and then ship it around at the end of the day. So it could also be because of those factors, and it could also just be a question of being fashionable. If everybody is going to Vietnam, then some people will say, why don't we go to Vietnam? If everybody is going to Bangladesh, why don't we go to Bangladesh? I mean, those would be those three factors. But you know what happens to most organizations is that they do not consider labor relations as they move. So they move in response to the market, they move in response to factors of production, they move in terms of the ed factor, ed by to me HERD, as in everybody is going, so let's go. But they do not remember that there could be a peculiarity arising from labor relations. And that's what I'll be trying to talk about from this point on. They don't consider labor relations. While they consider employees and their skills, they do not understand that there could be challenges coming from the nature of labor relations in different countries. Now, what I call labor relations is how you relate with employees that work for you that are unionized. Now, let me admit and agree from this point. Some people don't like unions. Maybe you're right, maybe you're not right. But the question is that unions is a reality of life. Is a constitutionally protected right in most countries, is recognized by the United Nations. So if you say you don't like unions, you may not like unions, but the question is that people have a right to join unions, and your workers may have a right to join unions. So as you go international, you got to start to think about, wait, is there a likelihood that where I'm going to, we have a different union structure than what I'm used to, and then I need to change my labor relations approach? Now, labor relations is how you deal with your employees who are unionized. In some countries, it's called labor relations. In some countries, it's called industrial relations. So it could be labor relations or industrial, as the case may be. And that question we need to ask ourselves is, how does labor relations change as you go across border from local to international to multinational to becoming global? You have to ask yourself, as I'm crossing boundaries, what is going to change in my labor relations strategy? And I'm going to use the examples of a company you are aware with, Tesla. Tesla needs no introduction. I mean, Tesla is one great company that has done so well for itself, producing electric vehicles and things like that. Tesla started in 2003 as a great company and has been in the US. They've been producing their vehicles in the US and doing well since 2003. But Tesla remained local in the US for a long time. And because of the laws in the US, they were able to run without having union. So in the whole of the US, there's no Tesla facility that has a union, right? Because of the fact that the labor relations laws and policy and market in the US is different. It's difficult to unionize in the US compared to even Canada. Also, because of that, there has not been any strike in Tesla factories in the US because they are not unionized. And Tesla has focused more on having employee engagement and not labor relations. Employee engagement is those tools you provide to keep your employees sustained and engaged with you, not necessarily working through unions. So, what has Tesla done in the US, which is very important and something for us to learn from? Tesla doesn't pay as well as the big three manufacturing car makers that are based in Detroit, in Michigan. They don't pay as much as them. But Tesla has done something to sustain its people, and what they have done is to give them shares. So these mechanics and these drivers and these foremen that work for Teslas are given shares of Teslas as part of their remuneration. They don't earn salaries so well, but they earn shares, and those shares are growing. So, technically you are making money, But Tesla has also done something alongside. Why they give you those shares, you don't access those shares immediately. You must work for a certain period of years before you can access it. What is called in labor relations vesting period. You need to have a vesting period before you can benefit from that in the case of Tesla. And that is what happened in Tesla. So somebody goes to work in Tesla and he has a choice to go and work with one of the big three in the US, the manufacturing organization for cars. You realize that if I go to work there, I earn more salary. But if I go to work for Tesla, I am going to have shares in Tesla, and those shares will do well. So they're able to use that to retain people, despite the fact that those ones knows if they go across, they may get a better place. Now, so Tesla has remained in that mode, being a company that is essentially local, as the case may be. But then there came a massive market in Europe. In Europe, people started to demand for electric vehicles in Germany, in Norway, in Sweden, particularly in Sweden, because the government of Sweden had actually come up with a slew of policies that encourage the use of electric vehicles. One of which was tax incentives for you to, if you use an electric vehicle versus if you use a fossil fuel vehicle. So there were VAT initiatives. There were so many benefits that it just made sense for you to ride an electric vehicle in Sweden. And then Tesla became the most sold car in Sweden. Now, Tesla does not make vehicles in Sweden. Tesla only sells in Sweden. The only country that Tesla manufactures is in Germany. Now, so when that happens, Tesla had to hope to start to sell a lot in Sweden. Now, the Swedish market is not a very big market when you consider the market where Tesla sells. Actually, in Europe, Sweden is about the fourth or fifth market in terms of number of cars sold, but it is a market and it's a rich market because of the per capita income. So, Tesla was forced to open repair shops in Sweden. They weren't in manufacturing. They only opened repair shops. And so they had mechanics, they had people who maintain people's vehicles in Sweden and all of that. And then something strange happens. The mechanics in those Swedish shops went to join a union. And in you were in Canada, in Sweden, you don't need the approval of your employer to join it. They joined the union and asked for a collective agreement. And then Tesla did not agree to it. And they had negotiations for many years and it didn't work well. And so on October 27, 2023, those workers decided to go on strike. Remember, Tesla does not manufacture in Sweden. Tesla only sells and maintains or repairs in Sweden. And they said they were going to go on strike, and Tesla said they didn't. They weren't too bothered because Tesla assumed that they would be able to fly in people to work for them. And then the strike started October 27, 2023. As I speak today, April 1st, 2024, the strike is still on. For the first time in Sweden, they have had a strike running into several months. Not for a first time in recent times in Sweden. And Tesla is still digging in saying they will not sign a collective agreement. But what is really happening? Why did those guys go on strike? And what is the difference in international human resources management between the US that Tesla is used to and Sweden that Tesla does not have a lot of experience with? I'm going to identify 5 to 8 differences that shows how the dynamics of labor relations changes across countries and the need for us to put that at the back of the mind. In Sweden, I'm going to start with the first one. In Sweden, labor relations is part of the social structure. In the early 1900s, there was a 1 month strike in US in Sweden, and the Swedish government sat down with union leaders and say, "Hey," and an employer say, "Guys, you guys got to regulate yourself. We're not going to get involved." So Sweden decided to say employers and employees will have agreements and government will not be involved. So, for example, while the US have the National Labor Relations Board, for example, NLRB, Sweden does not have anything like that. It's a relation between employer and employer. Do make yourself good and do the right things among yourself. So, for example, in Sweden, there's no minimum wage. There's a minimum wage in America because of the fact that they say government is not going to say what's a union. You guys should be, you're adults. You should be able to have agreements. And then what has then happened is that it has become easy for that to work because it's part of the social fabric of Sweden. So in Sweden, for example, you can't go report union to government that they went on strike. No, you can't because it's not going to happen. So that is where we're coming from. So there was a social political system that supported unionism in Sweden. The Americans don't have it. As a result of that, Sweden has a very high rate of people who are in unions or who have collective agreements. So if you notice what happens in the US, for example, the number of people that are, you can in Sweden you can have a collective agreement but not be in a union, right? That is not the case in America. In America, you will be in a union, then you have a collective agreement. And the fundamental reason is that the design, and that's the second difference between Sweden and the US, is that in Sweden, you do not sign employment collective agreement between an employer and a union. You sign with the employer association with the union association, right? So you don't go to say workers of Coca-Cola in Nigeria is signing with the management of Coca-Cola. No, all the beverage makers will sign a collective agreement with all the unions of the beverage manufacturers. So it's association to association, not employer to. So you can't. So as a result of that, if I'm not in a union, I will be covered by a collective agreement because it's not about my employer, it's about the association. So that's the second difference. In the US, you sign a collective agreement is between an employer and an employee. In Sweden, it's between the association of employers and the association of employees. So Tesla is coming from a culture that the employer can regulate whether he's going to sign union again, which is not the case in Sweden. The third significant difference is that in Sweden, and this is very important, you're allowed to go on what is called sympathy or secondary strike. A sympathy strike is a strike you can go on because a sister organization is on strike. So you want to exert more pressure. So an organization you have a relationship with is on strike on an issue. Then another organization goes on strike to put more pressure. That's a sympathy strike. In the US, sympathy strikes are illegal. In Nigeria, sympathy strikes are allowed. In Canada, sympathy strikes are allowed. In Sweden, sympathy strikes are allowed. So but the difference in sympathy strike in the US, because I think one of the assumptions of Tesla is that these workers are too few to shut down my production. But you see, the strength of the union in Sweden is a sympathy strike. And the sympathy strike is in two dimensions. So immediately that strike started, what happened immediately was that other unions started to go on sympathy strike. What will shock you is that the first set of workers that went on strike were dock workers, the people that are supposed to clear the Teslas as they come to Sweden. They went on strike. They were not striking over other people's cars. So Toyota, Ford could come to Sweden, but when a Tesla comes in, they're not going to touch it. And then not too long after, postal workers. Postal workers were not on strike in Sweden, but they were on strike on Tesla products. So, for example, when they make plate numbers or license plates in Sweden, it is the postal agency that will deliver it to the Tesla office. They will pick every other person's plate number, but they will not pick Tesla's, right? Because they were on strike for Tesla. And then before you knew it, and that was the one that was dangerous, cleaners. The guys who were cleaning the Tesla offices refused to clean the Tesla offices. They went on strike, sympathy strike, right? And then the next thing was that the municipal authorities that pick garbage went on strike on Tesla, right? So building one is Volvo, they'll pick the garbage. Yeah, building two is BMW to pick the. Then building three is Tesla. They go in front of it and they don't pick the rubbish, right, or the garbage. And then Tesla became dirty. Cleaners were not cleaning, people were not picking garbage. That was the first effect on that. Now, the second effect is that sympathy strike in Sweden is a sympathy strike for the whole of the Nordic region. Sweden, Finland, Norway, and Denmark. They have a right to go on sympathy strike with Sweden. So what happened was that when Tesla did not respond to the other strike, the ports in Denmark, in Finland went on strike and said, we're going to go on strike on Tesla vehicles coming through Finland, right? Now, the port in Norway also went on strike and said that if you ship in from the US Tesla vehicles, we're not going to clear it. We're not going to accept it. They went on strike. They will accept BMW. So what happened was that the supply of cars to the Nordic region started to reduce because the port went on strike. Now, but it wasn't a very effective one then. The truck drivers in Denmark went on strike. So the truck driver says, for you to get cars across the Nordic region, you rely on Denmark because of the geography of Denmark to drive those vehicles around. So they said, we will not drive Tesla vehicles into other countries. So truck drivers went on strike in Denmark. And so Finland, Norway, and Denmark started to do sympathy strike with with Sweden, which doesn't happen in even in Nigeria or in Canada, as I give example. Sympathy strikes are localized in the country, but in the Nordic region, sympathy strikes are across the country. So that became a challenge. That became a huge challenge, and Tesla started to struggle. There were no more there were fewer Tesla vehicles around at the end of the day. The other thing is that the strike started to grow. It started with the workshops, it went to the charging station, and then started to grow, as I've shown you. Another significant difference is that the power of the unions and the investment community. In Sweden and in Denmark, the investment community are very sensitive to union issues. So in December, there is a pension fund that had $70 million investment in Settler. They sold it in that's pension Denmark. They sold their 70 million stake in Tesla because of this union issue. Can you believe that? The union were able to influence an investment fund, a pension fund, that they sold their stake to put pressure on Tesla. Tesla didn't budge. So what has happened now is that we're almost getting an impasse because of the fact that the strike is still on and things are not working the way it should be. And that's one of the challenges of international HR, and one of the things we need to put at the back of our mind as we go across borders. And so, because when you think about various countries, people get excited about going across borders. So, in Nigeria, for example, there is an Access Bank that is in Ghana, there's a Zenith Bank that is in Ghana, Tim Hortons in Canada is currently in over 12 countries, for example. People are going to open. I know the very interesting people that are in the tech world in Nigeria are starting business in Nigeria and starting to open shops in Delaware and starting to think about that. They're thinking about, oh, I can register for free. Oh, there's no tax. Oh, the corporate tax is low. But they're not thinking about the union issues. Because at the end of the day, you may likely get yourself into trouble because you went to a country that has very strong union power. But what is going to be the end of this? I don't know what's going to be the end. But Sweden unions have a history. Couple of things that are important with union in Sweden is the fact that they rarely go on strike. Are you not surprised a country where over 60% of employees are in unions rarely go on strike? It's because once you sign the collective agreement, you can't go on strike. Once you sign a collective agreement, you can't go on strike. So there are less strikes in Sweden than in Canada, in Nigeria, or in the US, despite being the union. So, there's been all these people who associate unionism with going on strike. Sweden is proof that doesn't have to be the case. So the union has a lot of money. What do I mean? They collect check-off dues from their members and they don't go on strike. So when one organization decides to go on strike, they have money to pay them while they're on strike. They call it strike money or strike payment in labor relations. That's the money you pay an employee who is on strike. The union will pay them. If some of you remember how frequently, for example, the academic staff union universities in Nigeria has gone on strike. In other parts of the world, where you go on strike, your union pays you. So your employer will not pay you, then your union pays you. That's the whole basis of the no work, no pay agreement, is because your union will pay you. So because the unions in Sweden don't go on strike, they have tons of money to pay people. Actually, one of the union guys says if the workers in Tesla go on strike for 300 years, they have enough money to keep paying them. You'll be so surprised. So it has reinforced the power of the union because they know they're not going to run out of money. It's also important that the unions in Sweden have a track record of success against standing up to US companies. They've done it to two companies. The latest was Toys R Us. Toys R Us went to the US and said they were not going to sign collective agreements, and they said the unions dug in and said they're not going to change their mind. And Toys R Us had to look for a local vendor that they practically outsourced their business to, that now signed the collective agreement. I think that's also what Amazon did in labor in Sweden or in one of those Nordic countries when they were forcing them to sign collective agreement. So who is going to blink first, Tesla or the unions? The union has no incentive to blink. Why? They really have nothing to lose. Tesla may have something to lose, but again, how much does he have to lose? Sweden is his fifth largest market in Europe, not even in the world. So, hey, can they afford to lose them? But remember, the whole of the Nordic region is there. And Tesla has a reason why it will not want to agree. Because Tesla has been able to build a local industrial relations strategy that is built on a model. They are challenging it in Sweden. If they buckle in Sweden, they will have to buckle in Germany. Remember, I told you that Tesla has now opened a second factory in Germany. Some of the strongest unions in the world are in Germany. So once they agree to collective agreement and unionism in Sweden, they will have to agree in Germany. And then they will have to agree in the US. And that is now the issue. The UAW, the unions of car manufacturers in Canada, in US, has grown strong in the last 1 year. They appointed a new president. I'm going to do a video on that. You can check on sometime later about how the emergence of that person changed the strategy of labor relations in the US and make them grow. So the UAW has grown and has decided to invest. I think the last sum of money I saw was $10 million to target companies like Volkswagen, to target companies like Tesla, because their goal is to ensure that everybody in the automotive industry is join the union. So the fight in Sweden is actually more like a proxy war. Yeah, because the real fight is going to be in Germany and it's going to be in the US. So that's why Tesla would not agree. But I don't think they can stay for so long. Why do I think so? One of the strongest company that had a similar strategy is Starbucks. Starbucks also had a similar strategy as Starbucks. Last month, Starbucks decided to change the strategy and decided to work with unions. I believe that we have enough data to show that organizations can work collaboratively with unions. I also believe that we have enough data to show that unions can also work collaboratively with companies. Southwest Airlines has done pretty well. The pilots have been great. At the end of the day, it's about we respecting ourselves. It's not about unionism and clashes and all of that. If organizations and union leaders decide to not focus on their egos or dig in unnecessarily, we're going to get the result at the end of the day. One interesting argument that has come from labor relations in Sweden is the argument of Tesla that it doesn't want to sign collective agreement because they're already treating their workers well. So Tesla says we're already treating our workers well, so they don't need collective agreement. Then the unions in Tesla in Sweden are now saying, okay, so if you say you're already treating them well and you claim you are treating them better than what we're offering, so why don't you want to sign it? So if we say you should pay $10 and you're paying $12, why don't you want to sign $10? I mean, but Tesla wouldn't agree. The question is because in Sweden, it's beyond payment of salaries. What the collective agreement covers in Sweden is part of the EU social structure: pension, insurance, workmen compensation, support for workers, and things like that. For Tesla, collective agreement is about salaries. For Swedish union, collective agreement is about the life of the worker. So, at the end of the day, it's a clash of ideologies, a clash of philosophies, it's a clash of culture between Tesla and Sweden. It's a clash of culture between cultures that seems to believe that unions are ineffective and do not help the workplace versus cultures that believe unions can be integrated to get the solution we have. Now, Sweden is almost laying a record. They've laid one record, forced Tesla organization to go on strike. Now, that strike has now gone into the sixth month. Never happened before. Even in Sweden, a strike hasn't gone that long. Who is going to blink first? I really don't know. But I think the question I would like to ask all of us is, we need to start to think about the mindset we have about unions and employee relations. One of the courses I teach in the university is labor employee relations. And that course, the goal is to let people have a positive relationship, whether it's through unions or whether it's through unrepresented employees. One of the courses I also says international human resources, and that's where this conversation started from. Me talking to my students in class, my postgraduate students to be precise, about the fact that there are dynamics that are coming in the workplace that is changing things. I remember when I was talking about labor relations to the students that was taking international business in introduction to human resources. Yeah, one student in finance, accounting, and marketing, and we were talking about Tesla, and we're talking about international labor relations, and we're talking about they were really surprised and say, "Hey, they didn't know that there could be these complications that could come from that." Because for many of them, attending a great college like where I teach, for example, they have always had a vision that, oh, when I start my business, I'm going to open a presence in the US, and then I'm going to open another one in Mexico, or Mexico as some people call it. And one of the things I've also taught them in the class is the agreement. You remember the North African Trade Agreement that has a new name, NAFTA, between Sweden, the US, and also sorry, not Sweden, between Canada, the US, and also Mexico. And they've already started to envisage that they're going to start businesses that way. Now they realize that no, I got to understand the labor relations of the country I'm going to. So that Nigerian firm that wants to go and open a shop in Ghana or in US, are you thinking about labor relations in those countries? If you're going to open a branch in South Africa and in South America, Africa, for example, it's a totally different ball game. You remember one of the rave of the moment TV stations in Nigeria started a media company in South Africa and closed it down because it's a totally different ball game. International business is cool and sweet and productive, but we've got to remember international human relations includes international labor relations, and we have to be ready about it. I'm going to do a couple of some videos around this because it's important for us to start to know what are those landmines we should avoid as we seek to expand across borders. I'll be doing one very shortly on laws that are extraterritorial in nature that can get you in trouble. You're in Nigeria, you start a company, you go and register it in US, but you are in Nigeria and you think you can move ahead, you'll be shocked that somebody can take you to court based on what happens in your company using US laws. And then we'll be talking also about how unions suddenly became very strong in the last 1 year in the US, how the election of one man made a lot of difference. And now the election of another man are going to happen in November. It's going to make another difference. Thank you very much. I believe you have found this useful. It's been some interesting time talking about international labor relations and the concept of international human resources. So if you really enjoyed this video, if you find value in it, can I make a request? Can you like it and then subscribe? I'll be sharing some other workplace ideas and resources which us that can make a lot of difference at the end of the day. And if there's anything you want me to do a quick review about, you can also leave in the comment box. I'm going to respond and do a short video about it. I love to talk about the workplace, about human resources, but I love to talk about people because the workplace is where people work, and we've got to make it a cool place for them to work, whether they're in unions or they're not in unions. Thank you very much and enjoy your day.